This is a reading from Treason and Eswy, Book 2 of the Warlocks of Talverden. Prologue. This is our history, written not for the historians, but told for our descendants. Read it so that the story of those days is not forgotten. Remember it, so that what we built will endure, protected and honoured by those who come after us. Mori, Prince of Talverden. Part 1, Chapter 1, Corby, Ambush. The following account of the treason in Eswy was given by the Mossiver, Corby, sworn man of Prince Mori of Talverden. It was set down in his own words by Matilda Clerk, scholar of Asta College at the University of Craigroyal, at the request of Mori of Talverden, who says that, as a spy, the Mossiver never had to encode his reports, since special training is needed to read even his signature. The Mossiver has many skills. Fine penmanship is not one of them. Whoever they were good. We never heard them coming. I never even felt them coming, not till it was too late. That night, my lord and I had broken into the library at Hellisborg University, scaling the high walls and getting in through a window to the gallery, not for the first time. The library was a long chamber divided into dozens of alcoves by ranks of shelves, which thrust out like ribs from the walls. There must have been at least several thousand books, plus all the pigeonholes holding ancient scrolls and unbound manuscripts. The numbers still astonished me. Soft footfalls went on ahead, while I paused, listening. The prince's steps and my own breath, nothing else. The shuttered lantern I carried cast a dim golden light ahead of me as I held it high. Pillars supported the vaulted roof, and a gallery ran around 3 walls. In some of the alcoves were carrels, high-sided writing desks. A few of these had their own shelf or two, closed, with a locked grille. Masters and librarians of the university were allowed to keep books important to their studies shut away for their own private use. Taking them out of the library was forbidden. Master Arvel had been taking them out, although stealing books wasn't why we were spying on him. We'd been sent to find out what he was researching. Alchemy, philosophers' secret arts, secret weapons, we didn't know. We made lists of the books he had locked in his carrel, but so far we hadn't found a pattern. The prince was ahead of me at the other end of the long chamber. White light, cold as moonlight, but far brighter, sparked to life and rolled into a knot by his head. I could see him pulling books from shelves, opening them to read a page or two. I turned into the alcove where Master Arvel had his carrel. There were only a few volumes behind Arvel's locked grille now, half as many as there had been last time we were here. I didn't see what we really wanted, a little bundle of unbound pages. The ambassador's agent had reported that Arvel seemed to be writing a summary of his research, and that report had made the king send Mori and me to Hellisborg to find it. I set the lantern on the desk and slid its door open a little farther to shed more light. With my hand on the lock of the grille, I tried to empty my mind of other thoughts, pushing the nervous edge that comes with such sneaking work aside, pushing all the questions out of my head, pushing. The lock turned with a click, loud in the silence. It was enough to make Mori start back towards me. I could feel him, the quiet tension that goes with such work as ours, the patience and the calm that made him the man he was. All of a sudden I felt sharp fear and anger slamming into me, the emotions of a crowd of men, afraid and nerved up for battle. They hadn't been there a moment before. They had been hidden, and that wasn't possible. Unless they'd been in the half-world. Not possible. Not for humans on their own. It hurt, like getting kicked in the stomach, but I'd have been dead long before if I let the pain of the mind slow me down. "My lord!" I shouted a warning as I flicked the shutter of the lantern closed. The light made me a target. In the space of a breath I had my back to the shelves on the other side of the bay, sword and long dagger drawn. Then they were on me, and I barely had time to notice the strangeness of their weapons. I slashed almost blind at the nearest moving shape, and my blade rang skittering on steel beneath the master's black gown. I caught and swept aside a downward blow with my dagger as yellow light bloomed. One of them had opened the shutter on a lantern like my own, raising it aloft on a pole. Useful! I kicked a man in the chest. He reeled backwards, caught himself on a shelf. 3 of them, and they were all human. I couldn't say if they were really masters of the university or not. They wore black gowns, so did we. The wide-sleeved gown was a useful disguise at night, turning you into a formless shadow, and loose enough to hide armor and weapons beneath. They were all armed with narrow-bladed swords, but none carried daggers or bucklers. The edges of their weapons were globby, smeared with some thick resin, and it glowed with a greasy white light. The same paste was now scraped over my dagger's blade. I hesitated. Maybe a 6-foot Fenlander armed with a heavy greatsword wasn't what they expected to find in a university library in the small hours of the morning, though they'd come expecting something, that was clear. I grinned, casually swinging the long dagger in my right hand, sword raised in my left. I don't have a pretty face. Scare them enough, and maybe they'd back off. There wasn't a lot of room here between the shells. A sudden clash and shout told me that there were more, and they had met Maury. His first impulse would have been to get into the half-world, but if he thought I was in trouble, he wouldn't stay there. "Idiot!" I shouted. "Keep out of it! This is my job!" He wouldn't, of course. He's only passable with a sword, by my standards anyway, but he has other skills. I caught the mutter of hasty words in Telverdine, a spell to put the force of a horse's kick into an open-palmed blow. I'd seen that one before. The red light wrapping around his arm was spooky enough, even before he hit you with it. A grunt, a thud, a patter of falling books, probably from a body flying into a shelf. That decided the ones facing me that maybe I wasn't the worst thing in the library after all. They were quite right, too. I felt Maury building up walls within himself, shutting off all his emotion. Walls of ice, they always seemed to me, deathly cold, adamant hard. You can't let your animal rage at being threatened take over in a fight. You need that cold, thinking watchfulness to stand hand in hand with the long training that has become instinct. But for Maury, it was a lot more important than just not letting anger give his enemy an opening. Maury losing control of himself was bloody dangerous to everyone around, friend and foe alike. Maybe the strong old warlocks in the past had known how to control and direct power like what Maury's had become as he grew to manhood, but nobody did these days, and there was a fire-scorched training hall and a burn-scarred swordmaster in Senamore Castle because of it. I'd only seen that rage break free once, and it had saved my life then, but it was like one of those Eastern alchemical weapons going off, the ones that can bring down a city wall. I never wanted to see it again. Neither did Maury. Probably these fools were finding facing a calm, cold warlock armed with sword and magic quite scary enough. Two of my three charged again, while the one with the lantern, a plump, dark-eyed blonde man, a boy really, only a few years younger than me, stood nervously off, trying to watch for Maury over his shoulder without turning his back on me. I feinted at the one on my left, ducked, thrusting up at the one on my right, whose gown I'd already torn. He wore a breastplate beneath his gown, but not full armor, little room for a stroke with full strength behind it, so I went lower. My sword blade struck his hip bone with a sickening grate, and I rolled away, to come up with a return stroke that snapped the other man's dainty blade, meant for gentlemen's duels. He ran. I whipped the dagger after him, and he sprawled, twitching. No backplate. Bloody mess. Now we had a corpse to get out of the library, I thought. The boy dropped sword and lantern, shouting in Hallian, "Truce! Truce! I'm unarmed!" as he grabbed the wounded man under the armpits and began dragging him. I don't play polite games with people trying to kill me. I grabbed my own lantern, flicked it open just a crack with my thumb, and struck the boy on the head with the hilt of my sword as I went by. He'd live. The one he fell on might, too, since the wound wasn't spurting with much pressure. No saving the third one, though. Maury seemed to be all right for a moment, back to a pillar, two men lying senseless, one circling nervously at a safe distance. I set the lantern on the floor, retrieved my dagger, and turned the dead man's head for a better look. Blonde, brown-eyed, definitely human, and so were Maury's three. So where had they come from, and why hadn't I felt them coming? I'm a Fenlander witch. Humans don't sneak up on me. The man wore something on a chain around his neck. I pulled it out. An amulet of some sort, a golden disc with a pattern of concentric circles linked by random lines, all in gold and filled in with blue enamel. Pretty, but not the emblem of any great or lesser power or any noble house of Hallowland that I knew. I jerked it off over his head. It might help us figure out who they were. "Want a hand?" I asked. The look Maury gave me was a bit wide-eyed and desperate. His attacker chose that moment to lunge at him. Maury dodged, almost too slow, and that was when I realized he was wounded. Not all the sickening waves of pain I was shutting out came from our enemies. Some of it was his, leaking through his cracking wall of icy control. "Yarkus, save us," I muttered, and flung myself at Maury's opponent. He saw me coming from the corner of his eye and chose to run. I didn't bother to chase him, because the prince slid down on one knee then, the fiery exultation of battle and the wall of ice evaporating together. The air cracked and fizzled around him for a moment. He had been that close to losing control. Under his master's gown, Maury was wearing a leather jerkin over a quilted doublet. No armor of any sort. Who would bother for climbing over roofs and crawling in windows to creep around an empty building? But he's used to fighting with sword of war and shield. Maybe that instinct had betrayed him and he'd flung an arm up to protect his head, with nothing but a few hasty folds of wool gown wrapped around it. There was no clean cut, though. It looked to me like it had been a glancing blow from what was only a light thrusting sword. But whatever that glowing white paste was, it had burned through the gown and the sleeve of his doublet beneath. And what it was doing to flesh! He slumped against me, teeth clenched. I ripped away the layers of sleeve with my dagger, after hastily cleaning it on leaves torn from a book. Maury didn't notice the destruction, which shows how bad the pain was. In a long line, the skin was blistered through, black and oozing, and the white poison bubbled and writhed over his forearm like it was some living thing. "Don't scream," I warned, but he was whispering some spell, nothing I recognized. Words against poison, maybe, or against the pain. I wiped the stuff away with the clean side of the torn sleeve. Blackened skin came with it. "Arvel's notes?" Maury asked through clenched teeth. "Not here. Again, he must keep them on him. But we've done enough for one night. No way we can clean all this up." There was blood on Maury's sword, so the man who got away was wounded. Would he be coming back with others to collect his comrades dead and injured? Would he rouse the university proctors or the city watch? We couldn't afford to find out. "Leave that," the prince ordered as I reached for the poison-stained rag of a sleeve, thinking some of the alchemists or philosophers back in Craig Royal might be able to figure out what it was. Maury broke out in a sweat, even as my hand held it near. "It's got something in it, something akin to philosopher's fire." "Great powers." I hurled it away instead and gave him a hand up. He leaned on me. "Can you make it out of here?" "Have to, don't I? They knew they were hunting a night walker, whoever they were. But I can't climb over the roofs, Corby. Can you unlock the doors?" "Always," I said. One of my useful little skills. "Then let's go home." He pulled us into the half-world, and everything went foggy and colorless around me. There in the half-world, the paste on the edges of those swords glowed with a hungry light. Faint tendrils seemed to crawl off it, reaching for us, half-seen, like trails of fire in the corner of the eye. Sound was distant, as if muffled with water in the ears, but still I heard a door opening, and felt fear and grief and anger enter the library from the gallery up above. Someone who knew what had happened was coming back with others. Like with sound and sight, the half-world lets the whispers of the mind pass in only one direction. "More of them are coming," I said, "and Maury, they were in the half-world, or something like it, before they attacked us. I'd have warned you otherwise. I'm sorry, I didn't feel them." He nodded. They were in the real world now, whoever they were, but they might not stay there. We headed for the heavy main doors, where we had to slide back to the night so I could bewitch the lock open and let us through. I didn't bother to close the door as the prince drew us into the half-world again. The mess inside would make it perfectly clear someone had broken in. But the next day, while Maury, safe in the Dunmoran embassy, lay in a fever despite his spells and what skill I had in healing, I went out about the city and the university campus to see what I could learn. I would have stayed by him, but I'd done all the good I could. It was the ambassador's lady wife who ordered me away. "To stop his highness fretting and making himself worse," she said. "Set his mind at ease, my lord, and make sure Arvel doesn't disappear on you now." Master Arvel didn't seem worried. He left his lodgings late in the morning and went to the university as usual. As usual, when I broke in to search his squalid little room, I couldn't find the sheaf of notes that the ambassador's agent had reported seeing. There were the expected heaps of stolen books, though. On a wax tablet I scratched down a list of the ones we hadn't seen before. The prince had told me not to rob Arvel, not yet. If he didn't know he was being watched, we didn't want to let him know. There was no talk of intruders or murder in the library, no whisper of fear or mystery. Whoever our attackers had been, they had cleaned up after themselves. They wanted attention no more than we did.